The funny thing about humiliation is that it doesn't always feel hot. Sometimes it feels cold. Like your blood has quietly stepped back from your skin to watch what happens next. I'm Heather. I'm 32. And 3 weeks ago, I walked out of my father's retirement party like I was leaving a building that had been on fire for years, only no one else could smell the smoke. Picture a country club ballroom that smells like expensive cologne and old money. Crystal lights hanging overhead, servers gliding past with champagne like it's a birthright. The kind of crowd that laughs a little too easily because it's safer than thinking too hard. My father, Richard, was up on stage that night, perfect suit, perfect smile, being celebrated for 4 decades of leadership. 200 people were there to clap for him like he'd built something holy. And I was there too. Not because I wanted closure. Not because I believed in second chances. I came for one simple reason: I knew my father. And I knew he wouldn't let a room full of witnesses go to waste. Before I take you back to how this started, quick thing, if you're new here, make sure to subscribe to the channel, because this story doesn't just twist, it snaps. And you'll want to hear what he did after I left that room. Now, rewind with me. People in Fairfield loved saying our family name like it meant something. We lived in a big colonial house with too many rooms and not enough warmth. My dad ran a logistics company. We looked like one of those families from the outside, polished, successful, blessed. Then my mom got sick. Cancer doesn't care how nice your neighborhood is. It doesn't care how clean your reputation is. It takes what it takes. I was 8 when she died, and what I remember most isn't her face, it's her hands. Soft. Present. Always reaching for mine like she was trying to anchor me to something steady. 2 years later, my father remarried. Linda came into our home wearing that sweet, careful kindness some people use like perfume. She brought her son, Marcus, 3 years older than me, and almost overnight, the house stopped being mine. Not in a dramatic, movie-evil way. No screaming. No locked attic. Just replacement. Marcus became the focus. Marcus became the future. Marcus got praise, opportunities, pride. And me? I became background noise. My father never had to raise his voice to make me feel small. He did something worse: he looked through me like I wasn't worth the effort of noticing. Like I was a chair in the corner that had always been there and would always be there, so why bother? The only person who treated me like I had a pulse was my grandmother, my father's mother, Margaret. Every Sunday, without fail, she called. She asked about my classes, my goals, the things I didn't say out loud at home because nobody cared enough to listen. Sometimes she'd pause and say, almost like she was making a quiet oath, "Heather, you're not invisible to me." That mattered more than she ever knew. By the time I reached college, I wasn't chasing some wild dream. I was doing everything right. I was a business major, good grades, scholarships lined up, internships I was applying for. I had a future I could finally see. And for a while, I let myself believe my father would be proud once he couldn't ignore the proof. Then he called me home for what he described as a family meeting. Those 2 words were never a good sign. I walked into his study and found him behind that big desk, papers spread out like he was about to negotiate something important. Linda stood beside him, one hand resting on his shoulder like she owned the role of supportive wife in this scene. He didn't even look up when he started talking. He said they needed sacrifices. He said Marcus had been accepted into a top MBA program. And then, without blinking, he told me the plan: I would pause my education so Marcus could move forward. Not because we were broke. Not because it was impossible. Because they chose it. Linda added her little icing on top, something about how women don't need degrees the way men do, how I'd figure life out, how a nice husband would matter more than a career anyway. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I just sat there, listening to my own future being slid off the table like it was optional. And in that moment, something inside me went quiet. Not defeated, focused. Because when you learn you're disposable to the people who raised you, you either crumble, or you start building a life that can't be taken from you. That was the day I stopped waiting for my father to see me. And it was the day I started planning my escape, whether he noticed or not. But what happened at that glittering retirement party, under those chandeliers, in front of those 200 laughing faces, was the moment my father finally realized that invisible daughter wasn't just watching anymore, she was holding the knife by the handle. I wish I could tell you I stood up in that study and delivered some perfect speech. Something sharp and unforgettable. But real life doesn't always give you movie lines. Real life gives you silence. I nodded like I understood. Like I accepted it. Like I was the obedient daughter they'd trained me to be. And then I walked out of that room and went upstairs to my childhood bedroom, the one that still smelled faintly like old books and dust, and I stared at the ceiling for a long time, listening to the house settle around me. That night, I didn't cry. I made a list. It was a small, private rebellion. Not written in glittery ink, not dramatic. Just a plain page in a notebook. Finish school. Leave this house. Never ask for permission again. The next morning, I called my college advisor and asked about options they don't advertise on glossy brochures, deferring without losing credits, switching to part-time, taking online courses, transferring to a program with better aid. I kept my voice steady while my hands shook. Then I did something I'd never done before. I called Grandma Margaret. She picked up on the second ring, like she'd been waiting. "Hello, sweetheart." The moment I heard her voice, the tightness in my chest cracked open. I told her what happened. Not in a messy flood, just facts, like I was reading a report. My father's decision. Linda's comments. Marcus's future. My pause, my forced step aside. She didn't interrupt. She let my words land. When I finished, there was a pause, and then she said something that changed the direction of my entire life. "Come see me." That weekend, I drove to her townhouse with my notebook on the passenger seat like it was a map. She made tea, the strong kind that tastes like it's trying to wake you up. And when I finally looked up, she was watching me the way my father never did, like I mattered. "I'm not going to fight your father," she said gently. "That fight would swallow you. But I will help you build something he can't touch." She slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a check, more money than I'd ever held at once. "I can't take this," I whispered. "You can," she replied. "And you will. Consider it an investment in the granddaughter I believe in." I left her house with two things, the check, and a different kind of confidence. Not loud confidence. Not showy. Quiet confidence, the kind you carry like a hidden blade. Over the next month, I moved like a shadow in my own life. I found a small apartment across town. Bare walls, thin carpet, a kitchen that barely qualified as a kitchen. But it was mine. I applied for a job that fit around night classes, an entry-level operations role at a modest distribution firm. Nothing glamorous. No applause. Just work, spreadsheets, schedules, trucks arriving late, drivers calling angry, and me learning how businesses actually breathe. And I enrolled in a program my father didn't know about. I made it official, part-time evening courses, plus a certificate track in supply chain analytics. Everyone thinks success is built in spotlight moments. In reality, it's built in quiet rooms at 10 p.m. with cheap coffee and eyes that refuse to close. At home, I played the part they expected. I showed up for family dinners. I listened while Linda talked about Marcus's MBA like he'd been chosen by destiny. Marcus would sit there with that relaxed smirk, like the world had always belonged to him. And my father? My father would glance at me occasionally, like checking the weather, no real interest, just curiosity if a storm was coming. Meanwhile, I was building a life he couldn't see. It wasn't just about school. I learned how to speak in meetings without apologizing. I learned which managers actually had power and which just enjoyed hearing their own voice. I learned how to solve problems fast, how to stay calm when other people panicked, how to read a room and know when someone was lying. I also learned something I didn't expect. People noticed me. Not as Richard's daughter. Not as Linda's afterthought. As Heather. Someone capable. Someone reliable. Someone with sharp instincts. 6 months in, my supervisor pulled me aside after a messy late shipment turned into a potential client disaster. I'd stayed calm, rerouted, made calls, fixed the situation before it grew teeth. He stared at me for a second, then said, "Where did you learn to do that?" I almost laughed. Where did I learn? From surviving. But I smiled instead and said, "I pay attention." That's when the first real door opened. A colleague told me about a bigger opportunity, an interview at a fast-growing logistics tech company called Meridian. They were looking for someone who could bridge old-school operations with modern data systems. Someone hungry. Someone who didn't need their hand held. I printed my resume at midnight, rewrote it like my future depended on it, because it did, and walked into that interview with a calm I didn't feel. And when they asked me why I wanted it, I didn't tell them about my father. I simply said, because I'm ready to be taken seriously. The hiring manager leaned back, studied me, and smiled like she'd just spotted something rare. That night, as I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the city lights like they were possibilities, my phone buzzed. A message from my father. Short. Casual. The kind of message that pretends nothing happened. Retirement celebration next month. You'll be there. No question mark. Just a command. I stared at the screen for a long time, feeling that old coldness creep back in. Because I suddenly understood something. He wasn't inviting me because he missed me. He was inviting me because he wanted an audience. And the moment I realized my father was planning to use that party as a stage, I also realized I'd be walking into it with a secret he never saw coming. I didn't reply to my father's text right away. Not because I was scared, because I was measuring the weight of it. You'll be there. He didn't ask if I was free. He didn't ask if I wanted to come. He wrote it the way kings used to speak to servants, like my presence was part of the decor. For a few minutes, I just held my phone and listened to my own breathing. The old version of me would have typed back, of course. The old version of me would have shown up early, smiled politely, and tried to blend into the wallpaper. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I typed one word, okay. Then I set the phone down and went right back to work. Because the truth was, I wasn't walking into that retirement party as his daughter. I was walking in as a woman who had learned how to survive without his approval. And in the past year, survival had quietly turned into something stronger. Meridian hired me 2 weeks after that interview. I still remember the exact moment I got the email. I was sitting at my tiny kitchen table with takeout noodles, my laptop open, my work shoes kicked off like I was too tired to be hopeful. Offer letter attached. My heart didn't explode with joy. It did something calmer. It steadied. Like my life had finally clicked into a lane that was mine. Meridian wasn't a fancy name in my father's world. It wasn't a country club brand. It was a fast-moving logistics tech company that cared about efficiency, systems, and results, things that didn't require you to be born into the right family. The first month was intense. I walked into a building full of people who moved like they were running out of time. Meetings stacked on meetings. Teams arguing over dashboards. Clients demanding miracles. And for the first time in my life, no one cared who my father was. That was freedom. At Meridian, I worked under a director named Selena. She wasn't warm in the usual way, but she was fair. She didn't flatter. She didn't coddle. If you were good, she said so. If you were sloppy, she called it out without guilt. One afternoon, after I stayed late to rebuild a routing model that had been giving the sales team inaccurate projections, Selena stood behind my chair and watched the screen for a minute. "You think in patterns," she said. I wasn't sure what to say, so I asked, "Is that good?" "It's rare," she replied, and walked away like she'd just tossed me a key. Over time, I started to see how big companies get won, not through talent alone, but through timing, relationships, and whoever controls the narrative. And that's where my father had always been strong. Richard loved narratives. He loved the story of himself, hardworking, self-made, respected, admired. He loved being the man people toasted. What he didn't love was anyone else becoming a story. Especially me. Meanwhile, Marcus's MBA journey became the household religion. Linda treated every Marcus update like breaking news. My father beamed whenever anyone mentioned his stepson's potential. I watched it all with a strange kind of distance now, like I was observing a familiar play but no longer emotionally trapped inside it. Then, 3 weeks before the retirement party, something unexpected happened. Selena called me into her office and closed the door. On her desk was a folder stamped with a client name I recognized instantly, Fairfield Industrial Holdings. My stomach tightened. Fairfield Industrial was one of the major accounts my father's company had chased for years. They were known for huge logistics contracts and for choosing partners based on performance, not charm. Selena tapped the folder. "They're opening bids," she said. "And we're going to compete." I swallowed. "That's big." "It's huge," she corrected. "And it's political. Which means we need someone who can read people, not just spreadsheets." She leaned forward slightly. "You grew up in this area, right?" I nodded. "Do you know anyone at Fairfield?" My mind flashed through names, faces, old parties where I stood quietly in corners. Then one name surfaced, someone my father used to brag about knowing, Derek Hall, a procurement executive. A man who'd shaken my father's hand 100 times. "I've met someone," I said carefully. Selena's eyes narrowed, not suspicious, just focused. "Good. Because this contract could double our regional footprint." She slid the folder toward me. "I want you on this." I walked out of her office feeling like the floor had shifted. Because suddenly, this wasn't just my job. This was a collision course. If Meridian went after Fairfield Industrial, my father would hear about it. And if he heard about it, he would do what he always did when something threatened his image. He would try to control it. That night, I called my grandmother. I told her about Meridian. About the contract. About the party coming up. About the feeling in my chest that said, something is about to happen. Margaret listened, then said quietly, "Your father doesn't handle surprises well." I let out a small breath. "Neither do I." "Yes," she said, "but you handle them with courage." Before we hung up, she added, "Whatever you do next, Heather, do it with your head up." And here's where I'll ask you something. If you're enjoying this story so far, drop a quick comment like so I know you're still with me, because what happens next is where the gloves come off. Because 2 days later, Selena forwarded me a calendar invite. Fairfield Industrial, pre-bid dinner. Location, the same country club. Date, the night before my father's retirement party. I stared at the invite until my eyes stung. 2 events. Same place. Back to back. It felt like fate had planned a trap and handed me the key. And when I realized the Fairfield decision-makers would be in that ballroom one night, and my father would be there the next, I knew the retirement party wasn't just a celebration anymore, it was about to become a showdown. I didn't sleep the night I got that calendar invite. Not because I was afraid of the meeting. I'd done meetings. I could handle executives and spreadsheets and pressure. What I couldn't handle, at least not easily, was the idea of breathing the same air as my father while pretending I wasn't still the kid he shoved aside. Because here's the thing people don't tell you, you can outgrow a wound, but sometimes you still feel the scar when the weather changes. The pre-bid dinner at Fairfield's Country Club was supposed to be relationship building. That's the polite term for what it really is, a room full of powerful people making up their minds before anyone even shows their numbers. Selena texted me that morning, black dress. Simple. Confident. No sparkle. She wasn't just choosing clothes, she was choosing a strategy. Blend in without shrinking. Stand out without shouting. Let competence do the talking. I got ready in my apartment like I was putting on armor. Black dress. Clean lines. Hair pulled back. Minimal jewelry. A face that looked calm even if my stomach was twisting itself into knots. I arrived early and walked through the entrance, past the fountain, past the polished stone steps, past the same kind of people who used to look at me and see Richard's daughter. For a second, my chest tightened the way it always did here. Then I remembered, I wasn't here for them. I was here for me. Inside, the room was already buzzing, soft laughter, clinking glasses, a low hum of money. Fairfield executives stood in clusters, men in tailored suits, women with sharp eyes and even sharper smiles. People shook hands like they were exchanging invisible contracts with every touch. Selena came in behind me, dressed like she belonged anywhere she wanted. She leaned close and murmured, "Stay near me. Speak when it matters. Let them underestimate you if they want." I nodded. Then I saw him. Not my father. Derek Hall. He was standing near the bar, talking to two men I didn't recognize, a relaxed confidence in his posture like he'd never had to fight for his seat at the table. He was older than I remembered, grayer at the temples, but the same energy, charming, self-assured, the kind of guy who smiles with his whole mouth but not his eyes. I hadn't seen Derek in years. But I remembered him well. He was one of my father's friends. The kind of friend my father collected like trophies, useful connections, people who reinforced his importance. Derek had been at our house a few times, always laughing too loud, always treating Linda like she was a queen, always ignoring me unless he needed someone to fetch something. I took a breath and followed Selena toward the Fairfield group. Introductions started. Names exchanged. Pleasant comments about the venue, the weather, the exciting opportunity ahead. Then Selena said, "This is Heather. She's leading our operational modeling for the bid." Derek turned, looked at me, and his expression flickered, just for half a second. Recognition. He didn't say my name right away. He studied me like he was trying to place a memory. Then he smiled. "Well, I'll be," he said. "Richard's daughter." There it was. That old label, slapped onto me like a tag. I didn't flinch. I simply held his gaze and replied, "Yes. Heather. Not Mr. Hall. Not sir. Just Heather. Calm. Direct. Like my identity didn't need his permission." Derek chuckled, like I'd surprised him. "You've grown up." "So have you," I said, politely. Neutral. Nothing emotional for him to feed on. Selena, sensing the shift, kept the conversation moving. Derek talked about Fairfield's goals. Selena asked sharp questions. I listened closely, catching patterns, noting what he emphasized and what he avoided. He cared about reliability, risk, contingency plans. He wanted to hear that a company could handle the ugly days, not just the smooth ones. When Selena paused, I stepped in, not to impress, but to contribute. "We've mapped 3 disruption scenarios," I said. Supplier delays, port congestion, and last-mile failures. Each one has a pre-built rerouting plan. Not theoretical, tested against our last 12 months of data. Derek's eyes narrowed slightly. That wasn't suspicion. That was interest. I felt something shift again. A different kind of recognition. Not Richard's daughter. A professional. The dinner continued. I stayed close to Selena. I spoke only when I had something real to say. When someone asked about my background, I didn't mention my father's company. I talked about Meridian's work, about systems, about execution. And slowly, quietly, I could feel the room changing its angle toward me. Not dramatically. Not like a movie. But like the first turn of a key in a lock. Later in the evening, Derek approached me again, this time without the audience. He held a glass of water, no alcohol. His smile was smaller now, more controlled. "You work for Meridian," he said. "Yes." "And you're leading this bid modeling?" "Yes." He studied me for a moment. "Interesting." I waited. He leaned slightly closer, lowering his voice. "Your father know you're here?" My heart didn't race. It didn't drop. It did something colder. It went still. "No," I said. "He doesn't." Derek's mouth twitched, like he found that amusing. That could get complicated. I met his gaze. "Only if someone makes it complicated." His eyes held mine for a beat longer than necessary. Then he nodded like he'd just confirmed a suspicion. "Enjoy the evening, Heather." And he walked away. I stood there, feeling a strange mix of dread and empowerment. Because Derek's question had confirmed something I already suspected. My father had been chasing Fairfield for years. He would do anything to win that contract. Anything to protect his image as a man who always wins. And now his daughter, his invisible daughter, was inside the same room, quietly positioning herself on the opposite side. When I left the dinner that night, the air outside was cold enough to sting. I sat in my car for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, staring at the dark outline of the building. Tomorrow, this place would be filled with applause for my father. But tonight, it had already become something else. A battlefield. Because Derek wasn't just asking about my father out of curiosity. He was warning me. Or testing me. And I didn't know which was worse. But the next morning, I got a message that made my stomach drop, because my father had found out about Meridian, and he was already moving pieces behind the scenes. The message came in at 8:07 a.m. Not from my father's number. From an unknown one. "Nice to see you back at the club. Tell Meridian they're wasting their time." No name. No signature. Just a sentence that felt like a hand tightening around my throat. I stared at the screen until it went dim. Then I set the phone down and tried to breathe like a normal person. Like this was just another day. Like I hadn't walked into a room full of decision-makers the night before and felt my past staring back at me. I didn't have to guess who sent it. My father didn't do anonymity when he wanted to intimidate. He liked his power visible. This was someone else, someone willing to play dirty without claiming credit. Linda. Marcus. Or one of my father's loyal friends who liked doing favors. The worst part wasn't the threat. It was what the message implied: they were watching me. I went to work anyway. At Meridian, Selena was already on her second meeting. She waved me into a conference room and shut the door. "You look like you didn't sleep," she said. "I didn't," I answered truthfully. Selena didn't ask why. She didn't need the personal details to smell tension. She only cared about what could affect the bid. "Where are we?" she asked, tapping the Fairfield folder. I opened my laptop and brought up the modeling files. "We're good. But we need confirmation on 2 vendor rates. If they change last minute, our margin gets tight." Selena nodded. "Get it. Today." I hesitated, then said, "There's something else." Her eyes lifted. "Go on." I told her about Derek recognizing me. About his question, "Does your father know you're here?" And then I showed her the text message. Selena read it once. Then again. Her face didn't change much, but her voice dropped a degree. "Your father has influence?" "He has connections," I said carefully. "He's been chasing Fairfield for years." Selena leaned back. "So he'll see Meridian as a threat." I didn't correct her. I didn't say he'll see me as a threat. Because that was the part that still hurt to admit out loud. Selena slid the phone back across the table. "We don't flinch. We document everything. And we tighten security on the bid files. No leaks. I nodded. Relief and anxiety tangled together inside me. Selena's calm made me feel safer, but it also confirmed that this wasn't in my head. This was real. Around noon, I stepped out to take a call from my grandmother. "Did you go?" Margaret asked. No greeting, no small talk. "Yes," I said, walking to a quiet corner by the stairwell. I went. And? I looked out at the parking lot, at the ordinary cars and ordinary people living ordinary lives, people whose family drama didn't come dressed in tailored suits. "It went well," I said. "Too well." Margaret sighed softly. "Then your father will panic." "I think he already has." I told her about the message. There was a pause, and then Margaret's voice sharpened. "Heather, listen to me. Your father doesn't lose gracefully. If he thinks you're taking something from him, he'll try to punish you for it." "I'm not taking anything," I said, but even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true in his mind. Margaret's voice softened again. "Are you going to the retirement party tonight?" "Yes." "Then keep your eyes open. And keep your emotions locked down. Your father loves pushing buttons. He'll push until he gets a reaction he can display to other people." I swallowed. "What if he tries to humiliate me?" "Then let him," Margaret said quietly. "Let him show everyone exactly who he is, while you stay steady. That's how power shifts." After we hung up, I sat in my car for a few minutes, hands resting on the wheel, telling myself the same thing over and over. Stay steady. Stay steady. Stay steady. That evening, I drove to the club early, not because I wanted to, but because I didn't want to arrive flustered. I didn't want to give my father the satisfaction of seeing me rushed, nervous, uncertain. The parking lot was already filling with black SUVs and polished sedans. Inside, the ballroom was being transformed into a shrine for my father's ego, a large banner with his name, a slideshow of photos from his career, tables arranged like a wedding reception. Employees from his company moved around, setting up gifts and arranging centerpieces. And then I saw Marcus near the entrance, laughing with two men in suits. He spotted me and his smile widened, slow and smug. "Look who decided to show up," he said, loud enough for the men beside him to hear. "Dad will be thrilled. He loves a complete family image." I held my face neutral. "Hi, Marcus." He leaned in, voice lowering. "So I heard you're working for Meridian." My stomach tightened. He stepped back, pretending friendliness. "That's cute." One of the men beside him raised an eyebrow. Marcus kept going, enjoying himself. "Just so you know," Marcus said, "Fairfield's basically ours. Dad's been working that deal for ages. Meridian doesn't stand a chance." I stared at him for a second, then said calmly, "We'll see." Marcus's smile flickered, just a crack, then returned, sharper. "Oh, we will," he said. "And tonight? Try not to embarrass yourself." He turned away like he'd won something. I walked past him into the ballroom, the music starting softly, the first guests trickling in, the air filling with perfume and expectation. I found a spot near the back, away from the center of attention. And that's when I saw my father. Richard stood near the stage, greeting people with that polished grin, shaking hands like he was blessing them. When his eyes landed on me, his smile didn't warm. It tightened. He walked toward me with purpose, like a man approaching a problem he intended to solve. When he reached me, he didn't hug me. He didn't ask how I'd been. He leaned close, voice low enough that only I could hear. "So," he said. "Meridian." My throat went dry, but my expression stayed calm. "Yes," I replied. His eyes narrowed. "We need to talk." And in that moment, standing under chandeliers while the room applauded his greatness, I realized my father wasn't here to celebrate, he was here to crush me in front of everyone. My father didn't lead me to a quiet corner. He led me to his study. Of course the club had one, an upstairs office reserved for private conversations, which really meant deals, threats, and power games that didn't belong under chandeliers. The door shut behind us with a soft click that felt louder than it should have. He didn't offer me a seat. He didn't ask how long I'd been at Meridian, how I was doing, whether I was happy. Those weren't the questions of a father. Those were the questions of a man assessing risk. Richard adjusted his cufflinks slowly, the way people do when they want you to feel they have all the time in the world. "So Meridian is sending you to compete for Fairfield," he said. It wasn't a question. I kept my voice even. "Meridian is competing. I'm part of the team." His eyes hardened. "You're not a part. You're the angle." I didn't deny it. Not because I was guilty, because I wasn't going to beg for innocence in a room where he'd already decided my role. He paced once, then turned back to me. "Do you have any idea how long I've worked to build relationships here?" "I'm sure it's been a long time," I said. He stopped. The faintest smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, like he could hear the disrespect hiding inside my calm. "This isn't your world," he said. "These people don't care about your little reinvention. They care about reputations." I nodded slowly. "Then your reputation should be enough." His smile vanished. For a second, I thought he might raise his voice. Instead, he lowered it, dangerous and controlled. "Listen carefully," Richard said. "Fairfield is not going to Meridian. It's going to me. And if you're smart, you'll step away before you get hurt." I met his gaze. "Is that a threat?" He let out a quiet laugh, like I was being childish. "It's advice." He moved closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, the same cologne he'd worn for years, the scent of dinners I sat through feeling invisible. "You want to play adult games?" he continued. "Fine. Here's how this works." He tapped his finger against the desk, each tap deliberate. "I can make a call," he said. "I can make two. People talk. People remember. And people don't like being embarrassed. If Meridian loses Fairfield, they'll want someone to blame." My stomach tightened, but I didn't let it show. "So you're going to sabotage a company because your daughter works there?" His eyes flashed. "Don't make it emotional." I almost laughed. He'd spent my whole life making everything emotional, just never for me. He straightened his tie and said, "You're going to leave Meridian's bid. Tonight. You'll tell them you're reassigned. You'll disappear from the conversation. And in return, I'll let you keep whatever little pride you built." I stared at him. "And if I don't?" He shrugged, like the answer was obvious. "Then you'll learn what it feels like to lose." There it was. Not a father concerned for his child. A competitor daring an opponent. I looked at him for a long moment, then said, "I'm not doing that." His jaw tightened. He tried another tactic, smoother. "Heather, don't be stubborn. You've always been sensitive. You take things personally. This isn't personal. It's business." My voice stayed calm. "Then treat it like business. If your company is better, you'll win without bullying." The word bullying landed like a slap. His face changed, just slightly, but I saw it. The mask slipping. The anger underneath. "You're standing on my name," he hissed. "No," I corrected softly. "I'm standing on my work." For a beat, the room felt too small. Then my father stepped back and smiled again, cold, practiced. "All right," he said. "If that's the game you want, we'll play it." He walked to the door and opened it, as if dismissing an employee. "Go downstairs," he said. "Smile. Be charming. Try to look like you belong." I walked out without another word. But as I went down the stairs, my heart didn't feel broken. It felt awake. Down in the ballroom, the party was in full motion now. Guests filled the room. Laughter rose. Glasses clinked. A photographer snapped pictures of my father like he was royalty. Linda spotted me from across the room and glided over, her dress shimmering just enough to demand attention. "There you are," she said brightly, like we were close. "Richard said you two had a little chat." "A chat," I repeated. Linda's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I hope you're going to behave tonight. It would be unfortunate if you caused any awkwardness." "I'm not here to cause anything," I said. She leaned in, voice sweet as poison. "Good. Because Richard has a speech planned. And you know how he is, he loves storytelling." My pulse thudded once. "Storytelling?" I asked. Linda gave a small laugh. "Oh, yes. He's been reminiscing all week. Childhood moments. Family moments. He's feeling sentimental." The way she said sentimental made my skin prickle. Then Marcus appeared at her shoulder, grinning like he already knew what was coming. "Front row seats," he said. "This'll be fun." I looked toward the stage. The microphone was being adjusted. The banner with my father's name glowed under the lights. People were beginning to settle into their seats, ready to applaud whatever version of history Richard decided to sell them. And that's when I noticed someone near the side of the room. Derek Hall. He wasn't seated yet. He was standing by the wall, watching the stage, and then his eyes shifted to me. Our gazes met. And he gave me the smallest nod, like we were co-conspirators in a story that hadn't revealed its ending yet. My stomach dropped. Because if Derek was here tonight, it wasn't just a retirement party. It was a strategic meeting disguised as celebration. And my father was about to speak. But the moment Richard stepped up to the microphone, I realized he wasn't about to honor his career. He was about to turn me into the punchline, right in front of the people who would decide Fairfield's contract. My father took the stage like it belonged to him. Not in an arrogant way, something smoother. Like the room was already trained to lean toward his voice. The lights warmed his face, the microphone caught every breath, and the crowd settled into that eager quiet people make when they expect to be entertained. Richard lifted his glass. "Friends," he began, smiling wide, "colleagues, family, thank you." Applause swelled immediately. The kind of applause that isn't just clapping, it's agreement. Validation. A room telling a man, "Yes, you matter." He waited for the sound to fade, then continued with the practiced ease of someone who had given speeches his whole life. "I've spent 40 years in this business," he said, "and I've learned a few things." More nods. More smiles. People loved a man who spoke in lessons. He talked about grit. About humble beginnings. About sacrifice. And I felt my stomach tighten because every time he said sacrifice, my mind flashed back to that study. To the moment he asked me to step aside so Marcus could shine. Then he shifted, smooth as oil. "And of course," he said, "none of it would have been possible without my family." Linda's smile lit up like she'd been waiting for her cue. Marcus straightened in his seat, already soaking in reflected glory. Richard gestured toward them. "Linda, my rock. Marcus, my pride." The crowd applauded again. Linda laughed modestly. Marcus gave a little nod like a prince acknowledging loyal subjects. Then my father paused, and his eyes swept the room, slow, intentional, until they landed on me near the back. And I knew. This wasn't nostalgia. This was a trap. He smiled at me like we were sharing something tender, and said into the microphone, "And of course, my daughter, Heather." A murmur moved through the room. Heads turned slightly. People looked at me, trying to place me. I felt heat rise behind my ears, but I kept my posture steady. My grandmother's voice echoed in my head, "Stay steady. Let him reveal himself." My father's tone turned playful. "Heather has always been independent." Laughter bubbled in the crowd, light and friendly. He let it build, then added, "Maybe too independent." More laughter. He held up a hand like he was about to confess something adorable. "When Heather was in college, she had these big dreams. She wanted to do business, be her own woman, all of that. His eyebrows lifted like he was telling a joke about a kid wanting to be an astronaut. And I remember thinking, he paused dramatically, "Sweetheart, you don't understand how the real world works yet." The laughter got louder. My hands curled slightly at my sides. He continued, and of course, like any good father, I had to guide her. Help her focus. Keep her from chasing fantasies. My mouth went dry. Because now he wasn't just mocking me, he was rewriting the past in real time. In front of the very people whose opinions shaped contracts, reputations, careers. Then he delivered the line that made my blood turn cold. "She even tried to get involved in logistics," he chuckled, as if she could compete in a man's world. The room erupted again. And I watched it happen, the social reflex. The way people laughed because everyone else laughed. The way men grinned like it was harmless. The way some women smiled too, because smiling is easier than confronting cruelty in a room full of powerful men. I saw Derek Hall's face. He wasn't laughing. He was watching. My father continued, warming to his own performance. "But you know what," he said, "Heather eventually realized something important." He leaned closer to the microphone. "She realized family comes first." My stomach clenched so hard I thought I might actually bend in half. Because he was making it sound like I chose to step aside. Like it was maturity. Like it was love. Like he hadn't shoved me out of my future with a cold hand and an even colder gaze. He lifted his glass again. "So let's raise a toast," he said, "to knowing your place, and to doing what's best for the family." The laughter came again, but it wasn't as light this time. It had an edge, like people weren't sure if it was still a joke. Linda's smile was bright. Marcus's grin was satisfied. And me? I stood there, feeling like the floor had tilted. This was what my father wanted. A public win. A public reminder of control. A way to tell Fairfield's people, my daughter is nothing. Meridian is nothing. Don't take them seriously. And in that moment, I realized something painful and liberating at the same time. He wasn't embarrassing me because he hated me. He was embarrassing me because he thought it would work. Because he believed I'd do what I'd always done, swallow it, smile, disappear. But I wasn't 8 anymore. I wasn't 16. I wasn't the girl begging for his attention. I was a woman with a career, a team, a future, and a breaking point. I took one slow breath, and the room seemed to sharpen around me, faces, lights, laughter. Like my senses were zooming in before impact. And that's when Derek Hall stood up. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just stood. The movement caught a few eyes. A small ripple of attention shifted. Then Derek lifted his glass and said, clear enough to be heard, "Richard, before we toast, may I add something?" The room quieted. My father blinked, surprised, just for a fraction of a second. "Of course," Richard said, smiling tightly. "Derek, please." Derek turned slightly, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. And then he looked straight at me. I couldn't read his expression. Not fully. But I felt the message behind it. Stay calm. Watch what happens next. If you're still with me right here, type "I'm with Heather" in the comments, because what Derek said next didn't just shift the room, it changed the entire game. Derek cleared his throat. And my father's smile started to fade. Because Derek wasn't about to praise Richard, he was about to reveal something the whole room didn't know, something that would make every laugh die in people's throats. For a second, the room hung in that strange in-between silence, when people are still smiling, but they can sense a shift they don't understand yet. My father kept his glass lifted. He held his posture steady, the same smooth confidence he used in boardrooms. But I saw it, just a flicker in his eyes. He didn't expect Derek to interrupt. Derek Hall stepped closer to the edge of the stage, still not loud, still not dramatic. He didn't need drama. He had authority, and the room respected it instinctively. "Richard," Derek said, "you've had an impressive career." "No question. But since we're talking about knowing your place and doing what's best for the family." A few people chuckled awkwardly, unsure if it was still joking territory. Derek let the laughter die on its own. "I think it's worth acknowledging something else," he continued. "Something that's been interesting to watch." My father's smile tightened. "And what's that?" Derek's eyes flicked to me again, then back to my father. "That your daughter is not exactly who you're portraying her to be." The air changed. You could feel it. Like someone had opened a window and let cold wind cut through a warm room. My father laughed lightly. "Oh, come on, Derek. It's a retirement speech. We're having a little fun." Derek nodded as if he understood. Then he said, "Yes. Fun. But Fairfield isn't in the habit of making decisions based on fun." And that single sentence turned the room into stone. People sat up straighter. Glasses paused mid-sip. Even Marcus's grin faltered, as if he'd suddenly realized he was standing too close to the edge of something. My heart pounded once, hard, then steadied. Not because I wasn't scared, but because I could sense the moment tipping. Derek continued, calm and controlled. "Last night," he said, "Fairfield hosted a pre-bid dinner in this very building." Now heads were turning. A few Fairfield executives were visible across the room, faces neutral, unreadable. They weren't surprised. This wasn't news to them. It was confirmation in public. Derek looked at my father. Meridian was there. My father's jaw shifted slightly. "Yes, I'm aware Meridian is bidding." "That doesn't mean they're—" "Let me finish," Derek said, still polite, but firm. And that was another shift. Derek wasn't asking permission. "Meridian came prepared," Derek went on. "Not with flash. Not with promises. With substance. Risk mapping. Contingency planning. Measurable performance." My throat tightened. I kept my face still, my hands relaxed at my sides, but inside I felt like I was standing in the path of a storm. Derek's gaze swept the room again. "And the person who presented the strongest operational perspective, who answered questions with clarity, who demonstrated real understanding of the kind of pressure Fairfield deals with." He paused. Slowly. Deliberately. "Was Heather." Every eye in the room moved. To me. I felt the spotlight without a spotlight. Faces turning, expressions changing, the quiet recalculations people make when the story they believed suddenly breaks. My father lowered his glass slightly, almost imperceptibly. Linda's smile had frozen on her face like paint drying too fast. Marcus looked genuinely confused, like someone had stolen the script he thought he was acting from. Derek continued, "So yes, Richard, you can tell funny stories about your daughter. You can frame her however you like. But in the room where Fairfield evaluates competence, she was not a joke." Silence. Not polite silence. The kind of silence that makes you hear the air conditioner hum. Then someone near the front, an older man in a navy suit, cleared his throat. It was one of Fairfield's board members. I recognized him from the dinner, though we hadn't spoken directly. He looked at Derek, then at Selena, who had quietly entered the room during the speech and was now standing near the side, watching everything like a hawk. "Meridian's bid has been impressive," the board member said carefully. "We'll be reviewing all proposals, of course." It was formal language, but the message underneath it was clear: Meridian is not being dismissed. My father's face still held a smile, but it had become brittle. A smile used to prevent collapse. He raised his glass again, voice slightly too cheerful. "Well," he said, "that's wonderful. Heather has always been determined." It sounded forced, like he was scrambling to patch a hole in a sinking ship. Derek lifted his own glass, but his eyes stayed sharp. "To determination," he said. A few people echoed it, uncertain. Some clapped. Not a roaring applause, more like cautious acknowledgement. My father tried to regain momentum, but the energy had shifted out of his control. The room had tasted something real behind his performance, and now his jokes felt sour. He closed his speech quickly after that. Thanked people again. Made a harmless remark about the future. Stepped down from the stage to more applause than he deserved, and less than he expected. As soon as he hit the floor, Linda moved toward me like a missile dressed in pearls. Her eyes were bright, but not with joy. With me, she hissed, barely moving her lips. I didn't follow. Marcus appeared behind her, his expression darker now, the smugness gone. What did you do? He muttered. I looked at him calmly. I did my job. Linda's laugh was sharp. Your job? You've humiliated your father on his night. I held her gaze. He humiliated me first. For the first time, Linda's mask slipped completely. Her voice dropped, venomous. You think you've won something because a man made a speech for you? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The truth was obvious, I hadn't asked Derek to do it. I hadn't planned it. But it happened because competence has a way of surfacing, especially in rooms where power is watching. Behind them, my father was moving through the crowd, shaking hands, forcing smiles, making quick conversation. But his eyes kept darting toward me like he couldn't help it. Then he started walking in my direction, and people subtly made space, as if sensing the temperature drop around him. When he reached me, his voice was low and tight, like a wire pulled too hard. We're leaving. Now. I didn't move. He leaned closer, so only I could hear. You want to compete? Fine. But you don't get to destroy me in front of Fairfield. My voice stayed quiet. I didn't destroy you. I stood still while you tried. His eyes flashed. This isn't over. I believed him. Because my father didn't lose in public and walk away politely. He collected humiliation like debt. And he always demanded payment. But I didn't realize how far he'd go until the very next morning, when Meridian received a call that threatened to erase everything we'd built, and my name was suddenly at the center of it. The next morning, Meridian felt different. Not because anyone said anything, because the air itself had that electric tension, like something had happened while we were asleep and now the building was holding its breath. I walked in with my coffee, trying to keep my face neutral, trying to move like a normal employee on a normal day. But the moment the elevator doors opened, I saw the look on the receptionist's face. Not fear. Not panic. A warning. Heather, she said quietly, Selena wants you in conference room B. Now. My stomach tightened. I didn't ask questions. I just walked. Conference room B had glass walls, but the blinds were pulled. That alone told me it wasn't a routine meeting. It was privacy. Damage control. When I stepped inside, Selena was standing, arms crossed, phone in hand. 2 other people were there, Martin from legal and Jaya from compliance. Both of them looked like they hadn't slept. Selena didn't waste time. Fairfield called, she said. I set my coffee down, hands steady. Okay. Martin cleared his throat. They received information. Allegations. My chest went cold. About Meridian? Jaya shook her head slightly. About you. For a second, it felt like I'd been pushed underwater. I could hear words, but they didn't land. Selena slid her phone across the table. Listen. It was a voicemail transcript, detailed enough to make my skin crawl. Anonymous caller. Concerned party. Claiming I was a conflict of interest. Claiming I was using personal family ties to influence Fairfield's procurement process. Suggesting Meridian's bid should be disqualified because of unethical access through me. There were even phrases that sounded like they were chosen specifically to trigger compliance alarms: insider influence, undisclosed relationships, manipulation of decision makers. I read it twice. Then I looked up slowly. That's not true. Selena's gaze stayed locked on me. I know. Martin added, but Fairfield has to investigate. They're bound to. Which means we could be frozen out, Selena finished. A quiet, heavy pause fell over the room. Fairfield wasn't just a contract. It was Meridian's next level. Selena had said it herself, it could double the region's footprint. It could change careers. It could cement the company's future. And now, because someone had made a phone call, the whole thing was wobbling. My mind went instantly to my father. Not as a theory, like a bell ringing in a silent house. Selena leaned forward. Heather. I need you to be completely honest. Have you had any private contact with Fairfield decision-makers outside the pre-bid dinner? No, I said immediately. Only in official settings. With you there. Texts? Calls? Old family connections reaching out? I hesitated only because I remembered the anonymous text from yesterday morning. Then I said, I got a message. A threat. I told you. Jaya nodded. We have that documented. Good. Martin asked, is your father connected to Fairfield? Yes, I said. He's been chasing their business for years. He knows people there. Selena's face hardened. So he's trying to poison you to poison us. I didn't correct her. Because she was right. But there was another layer she couldn't feel the way I could. This wasn't only about business. This was revenge. My father couldn't erase what happened at the party. Derek's words had exposed him. Not as a villain, people in that room would never say that out loud, but as a man whose jokes weren't harmless. A man whose control wasn't complete. And men like my father didn't tolerate cracks in their image. Selena took a breath, then said, we're going to respond with facts. She looked at Martin. Pull everything. Meeting logs, emails, invites, presentations. A clean timeline showing Heather's involvement was official and supervised. Martin nodded. Already started. Selena looked at Jaya. Draft a compliance summary. Emphasize controls. Access restrictions. No personal contact. Jaya nodded too. Then Selena turned to me. And you, write a statement. Clear. Direct. No emotion. Just truth. My mouth went dry. If they freeze the bid, do we lose? Selena held my gaze. Not if Fairfield believes integrity matters more than noise. That sounded strong. Brave. Corporate. But I could see the truth behind her eyes. Fairfield didn't need an excuse to choose a safer option. They didn't need proof I was guilty. They only needed uncertainty. After the meeting, I went back to my desk and tried to work, but my hands didn't want to be normal. Every click of my keyboard felt loud. Every email notification sounded like a warning bell. I typed my statement anyway. I wrote the truth the way Selena asked, clean, factual, unemotional. But inside, my thoughts weren't clean at all. They were sharp. How far would my father go? Would he call Fairfield directly? Would he threaten them? Would he spread rumors in the town? Would he try to make me look unstable, untrustworthy, desperate? Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number again. My thumb hovered for a second before I opened it. I told you to step away. 3 words. Cold. Simple. Absolute. My pulse thudded in my ears. I stared at the message, and for the first time I didn't feel fear. I felt clarity. Because whoever was sending these messages wasn't just warning me. They were admitting it. They were confirming sabotage. I took a screenshot, forwarded it to Selena and Jaya, and sat there staring at my screen like I was watching 2 worlds collide, my past and my future. An hour later, Selena called me back into her office. Her face was composed, but her voice was quieter than usual. Fairfield has requested a private meeting, she said. Not with the whole team. Just you and me. My stomach dropped. When? I asked. Selena held my gaze. Tonight. And then she added the line that made everything tighten inside me. They wanted off-site. Off-site meant private. Off-site meant controlled. Off-site meant someone was trying to keep this out of official channels. And I knew exactly who liked things off the record. My father. But the real shock wasn't Fairfield's request, it was what I saw when Selena and I arrived at that off-site meeting, because sitting inside, already waiting, was the last person I ever expected to face again. The off-site meeting wasn't in an office. It was in a private dining room at a restaurant near the club, one of those places where the lights are low, the menus don't show prices, and the booths are deep enough to hide secrets. The kind of place my father loved because conversations there never had to become records. Selena and I arrived 5 minutes early. She didn't speak much in the car, just kept both hands on the wheel, eyes forward, jaw set. That was how Selena handled pressure, by turning into a straight line. At the entrance, a hostess led us down a hallway lined with framed wine labels and soft music. She stopped at a closed door and gave a polite knock. It's all set, she said. The door opened. And my stomach dropped so fast I felt dizzy. Inside the private room, seated at the table with a glass of water, was Derek Hall. But that wasn't the shock. The shock was the man sitting beside him, relaxed as if this was his home court. My father. Richard looked up and smiled, small, controlled, like a man greeting a guest he didn't fear. Heather, he said warmly. Selena. Glad you could make it. Selena didn't sit. She didn't smile. She just stood there and stared at him like she was trying to decide whether to flip the whole table. This is inappropriate, she said, voice calm but sharp. My father spread his hands, playing innocent. Inappropriate? Come on. We're all professionals. Let's not be dramatic. Derek cleared his throat gently, as if he wanted to appear neutral. Thank you for coming, he said. Fairfield asked for an informal conversation to clear the air. Selena's eyes narrowed. Fairfield asked, or Richard asked? Derek didn't answer directly. He gestured toward the chairs. Please. Sit. Let's talk. Selena looked at me. That quick glance said 1,000 things. Stay steady. Let me handle the structure. Don't let emotion become ammunition. We sat. My father leaned back, fingers laced. He looked comfortable, too comfortable. Like this room was exactly where he wanted the story to unfold. Derek folded his hands on the table. There were allegations raised about a conflict of interest in Meridian's bid. Selena replied immediately. Allegations that are false. We have documentation. We have logs. Heather's interactions were supervised and official. Derek nodded slowly. We've reviewed the initial materials. My father smiled. I'm sure. Selena turned her gaze to him. Why are you here? My father's tone stayed mild. Because I care about Fairfield's integrity. And because, well, Heather is my daughter. If there's confusion, it's better handled responsibly. Responsibly. The word made me want to laugh. Derek looked at me. Heather, I have to ask directly, did you use personal access to gain influence in Fairfield's decision-making? I met his eyes. No. Have you had private conversations with anyone at Fairfield outside official bid settings? No. Have you ever offered incentives? Pressure? Emotional leverage? Anything of that sort? No, I said again, voice steady. My father sighed as if he was disappointed in me, not angry. Just disappointed. Like I was a child being difficult. Derek, Richard said smoothly, the issue isn't that she did anything illegal. It's that she lacks perspective. She's young. She's emotional. She's trying to prove something. Selena's posture sharpened. Do not talk about her like she isn't in the room. My father's smile widened slightly. I'm talking about her because she is the center of this. Then he turned to me. Heather, he said gently, you've always wanted to be seen. I understand that. But you're playing with serious people now. If Meridian loses this bid because of confusion around you, that's on you. I felt the familiar urge rise, fight, defend, explain. But I remembered Margaret's advice. Stay steady. Let him reveal himself. So I said calmly, if Meridian loses because of rumors, that's on the person spreading them. Derek's eyes flickered. Selena leaned forward. Exactly. And since we're here, I'd like to know why this meeting is off-site, undocumented, and includes a competitor. Derek looked uncomfortable for the first time. It was suggested that an informal setting could reduce tension. Selena's voice didn't rise, but it cut. No. An informal setting reduces accountability. My father chuckled. Selena, don't act like this is scandalous. Businesses talk. Competitors talk. Fairfield chooses what's best. Selena stared him down. And you're here to push what's best for you. My father's eyes hardened, just for a blink. Then he leaned toward Derek. Derek, let's be honest. Meridian is a newer player. My firm has decades of experience. Fairfield knows me. Trust matters. Derek held his gaze. Trust does matter. My father smiled as if he'd won. Then Derek turned his head slightly towards Selena and me. But performance matters too, he added. The room tightened. My father's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Just a hairline crack. But I saw it. Then Derek continued, carefully, Fairfield is considering all bids. The allegations create a concern. But they are not, at this time, disqualifying. Selena nodded once. Good. Because we're prepared to submit everything you need. My father exhaled, as if annoyed. So what is it you want, Derek? Derek looked at me again. Heather, there's one more question Fairfield needs clarity on. My chest tightened. What? Derek's voice stayed calm. If Fairfield awards this contract to Meridian, can you guarantee there won't be interference from your father's side? No sabotage, no pressure, no retaliation that disrupts operations? The question hit me like a punch. It wasn't just about my integrity anymore. It was about my family, about whether the people who raised me could be trusted not to burn a contract out of spite. My father's eyes locked on mine, daring me to answer wrong. Selena didn't move. She let me have the moment. I took a breath and said, yes. My father's eyebrows lifted. You can guarantee what I do? I didn't blink. I can guarantee what Meridian will do. And I can guarantee I will document any attempt to interfere. Silence. Derek's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Selena's expression stayed steady. My father's jaw flexed. And then he smiled again, slow, dangerous. Well, he said softly, looks like my daughter has learned to threaten. Selena's voice was ice. She's learned to protect her work. My father's smile didn't fade. Good. Then we understand each other. He looked at Derek. Fairfield will choose wisely. Then he stood. But before he left, he leaned toward me just enough to whisper, so low Selena couldn't hear. You think you're strong now, he murmured. Let's see how strong you are when the town hears the real story. Then he walked out, calm as a man leaving a dinner he enjoyed. The door clicked shut. And I realized my father wasn't going to fight me with contracts anymore. He was going to fight me with reputation. If you've made it this far, do me a favor, hit like and comment so I know you want the next chapter, because what Richard tried next was uglier than any business sabotage, it was personal warfare. Because the next day, a rumor spread through Fairfield so fast it felt engineered, and by noon, I got a call that made my hands go numb, the call that could destroy everything I'd built. Rumors don't spread like fire. They spread like perfume. Soft at first. Almost pleasant. Then suddenly, they're everywhere, on people's clothes, in their hair, lingering in the air long after the person who sprayed it is gone. The next morning, I felt it before I heard it. When I walked into Meridian, the energy was off again. Not the sharp urgency of a project deadline, something messy. Something human. People weren't staring openly. They were doing that thing where they glance and then pretend they weren't. Conversations dipped when I passed. A laugh started, then died halfway. I went straight to my desk and opened my email. There it was. A meeting request from HR. Subject line, clarification meeting, urgent. My stomach sank. Before I could even process it, Selena appeared beside my desk. "Don't check your face," she murmured. "Walk with me." Her tone was calm, but her eyes were already fierce. We moved down the hallway toward her office. Inside, she closed the door and held up her phone. "You need to see this," she said. On her screen was a screenshot someone had sent her, one of those neighborhood social posts that floats between concern and entertainment. It was written like gossip dressed as warning. "Have you heard about Richard's daughter? Apparently she's trying to sabotage her father's business. Says she's with Meridian now. Heard she's unstable. Heard she's using connections to manipulate Fairfield. Richard must be heartbroken." Below it were comments. People who didn't know me, acting like they did. "Oh wow, that's embarrassing. Kids these days have no loyalty. Richard has always been such a good man. Poor Linda. Poor Marcus. She's probably jealous." Jealous. That word hit harder than the rest because it was the oldest weapon they'd always used against me. The simplest explanation that made everyone feel comfortable: she's not talented. She's just bitter. Selena's voice was quiet but steel-lined. "This is not random." "No," I said, throat tight. "It's him." She nodded once. "Okay. Then we treat it like what it is, retaliation." My phone buzzed. HR again. I didn't answer. I stared at it like it might bite. Selena placed a hand on the edge of her desk and leaned forward. "Heather, listen to me. You're not guilty of anything. But we're going to respond like professionals, not like victims. We document. We protect the company. And we protect you." I swallowed. "But if Fairfield sees this..." Selena cut in. "Fairfield is not a Facebook comment section. They care about facts. That's why they asked the question last night. They were anticipating exactly this." Her words helped, but my chest still felt tight. Because Fairfield might not care about gossip, but people do. And reputations don't just affect contracts. They affect your daily life. Your ability to work without being watched. Your chance to move forward without carrying someone else's lies on your back. I stood up straighter. "What do we do?" Selena's eyes sharpened. "We go on offense." She opened a folder and slid a printed packet toward me. A timeline. Email chains. Meeting invites. Attendee lists. Security access logs. Every piece of proof showing that my involvement had been supervised and ethical. "It's all here," she said. "Legal has it, compliance has it, and Fairfield will have it within the hour." Then she added, "And I spoke to Derek." My heart jolted. "You did?" Selena nodded. "He didn't love the rumor. He called it unprofessional noise." His words. Relief came, small but real. Then Selena said the sentence that made my blood run cold again. "But Fairfield also received a separate call this morning." My throat tightened. "From who?" Selena stared at me, From your father. Directly. For a second, I couldn't breathe. He called Fairfield? I whispered. Yes, Selena said. Not Derek's direct line, another executive. He framed it as a concerned father. Suggested you're emotionally unstable and that Meridian is being reckless putting you on the bid. I felt something inside me crack, not into tears, but into anger. A deeper, steadier anger. The kind that doesn't need to shout to be deadly. Did they believe him? I asked. Selena's gaze didn't soften. They didn't dismiss him. That was the terrifying part. Because even if they didn't believe him, they now had to consider the risk. They now had a reason to worry. And in procurement, worry is sometimes enough to choose the safer option. My phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't HR. It was my grandmother. I answered quickly, voice low. Grandma. Margaret didn't waste time. I heard. My stomach dropped. How? I have friends, she said sharply. And your father is not being subtle. He's telling people you've lost your mind. My hands curled into fists. He's lying. I know, she replied. But lies don't need truth to travel. They need a vehicle. And your father has many. I closed my eyes for a second. What do I do? Margaret's voice softened slightly. You stop playing defense. You stop trying to stay polite while he drags you through the mud. I swallowed. He's my father. No, she said, voice steady, he's a man trying to destroy you. And a father doesn't do that. Her words landed like a hard truth I'd avoided for too long. Margaret continued, Heather, do you remember the trust one told you about years ago? The one I said your father didn't need to know about? My heart stopped. What trust? I whispered. Margaret exhaled slowly. The one tied to the shares. The one tied to the company's original capital. My skin went cold. Because suddenly, the story wasn't just about a contract. It was about the foundation under my father's feet. Margaret's voice turned quiet and serious. You have more power than you think. And it's time you understood exactly where it comes from. I couldn't speak. Selena was watching me carefully, reading my expression like she could see the words through the phone. I managed, Grandma, what are you saying? Margaret paused, then said, I'm saying your father built his empire on something he didn't fully earn. My breath caught. Because if that was true, then his entire image wasn't just cracked. It was standing on stolen ground. And when I finally learned what my grandmother meant, when I saw the documents she'd kept hidden for years, I realized my father's biggest secret wasn't about Fairfield, it was about who actually owned the power in our family. I drove to my grandmother's house that evening like I was chasing the answer to a question I'd been too scared to ask my whole life. The sky was turning the color of bruised steel, and the streets felt oddly quiet, like the town was holding its breath along with me. I parked in front of Margaret's townhouse and sat in my car for a moment, hands gripping the wheel, trying to prepare for whatever truth she was about to put in my lap. When I finally knocked, she opened the door almost immediately. No smile. No tea first. No warm buffer. Just urgency. Come in, she said, stepping aside. Inside, her living room looked the same as always, neat, careful, timeless. But on the coffee table, there was a folder thick enough to look like a weapon. Beside it sat a second folder, older, with yellowed paper edges. And a small envelope sealed with wax. My throat tightened. Grandma. Margaret pointed at the couch. Sit. I sat. She didn't. She stood over the table like a judge at sentencing and slid the top folder toward me. You deserve the truth, she said. My fingers hovered before I touched it, like part of me still believed I wasn't allowed to open doors in this family. Then I opened it. Inside were documents, legal filings, old shareholder notes, business formation paperwork. Names. Percentages. Dates. Signatures. I scanned the first page, and my eyes snagged on the line that made my heart stop. Margaret Whitmore, controlling interest. I looked up sharply. You owned the company? Margaret nodded. From the beginning. My mouth went dry. But Dad. Your father talks like he built everything alone, she cut in. He didn't. She tapped the papers with one finger, steady and unforgiving. When your grandfather died, I had a choice. Sell my shares, take my money, disappear into comfortable retirement, or protect the structure so the business could grow. I stared down at the documents again, my mind racing. You let him run it, I whispered. I let him run operations, she corrected. I never gave him full ownership. My heart hammered. Why? Margaret's expression softened for a moment, just enough to show something like sadness. Because I saw something in your father early, she said quietly. A need to control. A need to be admired. A willingness to treat people like pieces. I swallowed hard. And because, she added, I promised your mother I'd always keep a door open for you. My chest tightened at the mention of my mom. Her hands. Her warmth. The anchor I'd lost too soon. Margaret slid the second folder closer. This is the trust one mentioned. My hand shook slightly as I opened it. It was structured carefully, like Margaret had built it with the patience of someone who knew time would be her strongest ally. A percentage of shares set aside. Dividends redirected. Legal clauses tied to family inheritance. And then I saw my name. Heather Whitmore, beneficiary. My vision blurred for a second, not from tears, but from the shock of suddenly realizing I wasn't powerless. Not then. Not now. Not ever. I looked up at Margaret. Why didn't you tell me? Because your father would have crushed it, she said simply. He would have found a way to bury you under guilt, or charm, or fear. And you weren't ready. I swallowed, voice rough. Am I ready now? Margaret leaned forward slightly. You are. Because he's shown you what he's willing to do. He's not just trying to win Fairfield. He's trying to erase you. I exhaled slowly, staring at the pages again. All my life, I believed I was standing outside the house of power, pressing my face against the glass. But I wasn't outside. I was in the foundation. My grandmother sat down across from me for the first time, her eyes locked on mine. Your father made a mistake, she said. He thought humiliation would send you running. He thought reputation would break you. I heard my own voice come out quieter than I expected. He's ruining my name. Margaret nodded. Then you correct the record. My throat tightened. How? She slid the wax-sealed envelope toward me. That, she said, is a notice. Legal. Formal. I stared at it. A notice for what? Margaret's voice was calm, but the words were sharp as a blade. To remind Richard, she said, that his control is not absolute. And to remind him that if he continues this, he can lose more than a contract. My heart thudded. I could already imagine his face when he found out. The rage masked by charm. The disbelief. The panic when the mask began slipping in places he couldn't hide. But even with the power in my hands, I felt the grief underneath it. Because none of this was what I wanted. I didn't want revenge as a hobby. I didn't want to destroy a man just because he was cruel. I wanted peace. I wanted to live without being hunted by the person who was supposed to protect me. Margaret watched my expression shift and said something I'll never forget. Power doesn't always feel good, she said. Sometimes it feels like responsibility. Sometimes it feels like choosing yourself for the first time. I sat there, staring at the envelope. Then I picked it up. Okay, I whispered. That night, I went back to my apartment and called Selena. I told her everything, about Margaret's controlling interest, the trust, the documents, the proof that my father's self-made empire wasn't the story he sold to the world. Selena didn't react with drama. She reacted with strategy. "This changes leverage," she said. "And it changes risk." I nodded. "I don't want to destroy him." Selena's voice softened slightly. "You don't have to. You just have to stop letting him destroy you." The next morning, Fairfield called. Not Derek this time, another executive, one of the people who had stayed quiet through the party and the rumor storm. "We received Meridian's documentation," the voice said. "And we've reviewed the allegations." My pulse hammered. "And?" I asked. There was a pause. "Meridian remains under consideration," he said. "And we're aware that some external pressure has been applied." My breath caught. "We don't like pressure," he added. The call ended with polite professionalism, but the message was clear. Fairfield had seen through some of it. Maybe not all. But enough. I sat down slowly, staring at my phone like it was a doorway. My father had tried to bury me with laughter and gossip. Instead, he'd forced my grandmother to hand me the truth. And now, for the first time, the future felt like mine, not because he allowed it, but because I finally claimed it. I don't know yet what Fairfield will decide. These deals take time, and politics doesn't die overnight. But I know this. My father can't scare me back into being invisible. Because once you learn you were never powerless, you stop acting like you are. And if there's a lesson here, it's this: sometimes the people who try the hardest to put you in your place are terrified you'll discover you never belonged beneath them. If this story hit you anywhere in the chest, please like, subscribe, and share, and comment what you would have done in Heather's position, because I read every comment and your take might be the most important part of the conversation.